Allow me to bring up, acknowledge, and introduce the director of The King of Broken Hearts, Jeremy Dillon. So, we're gonna put you right in the center there. So there's actually you go back a bit with Jim in that you met him when you were, even though you're redonkulously young anyway, which I'll get over, but you met him as a very young man in Australia.
Yes, I was 11 years old, so that's 11 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you can go now. No. What is it about Jim that you found so compelling that you wanted to make a movie about him?
Well, it was really, the reason behind making the films was kind of in two parts. One of them was, I feel like, although Jim is really well known within the industry and within musicians, he is a bit underappreciated by the public at large, and the diversity of his career has meant that there's people who, they might know the hit songs that he's written for George Strait and Patti Loveless and the Dixie Chicks and Gary Allan, etc., but they don't know about his work with Elvis Costello, or they know about his hosting the Americana Awards, but they don't know about his Grammy-winning bluegrass albums, or they don't know about his Sirius XM radio show with Buddy Miller, but etc., etc., etc. So it was partly because of that, like a celebration of Jim's work and trying to bring him to a wider audience. And the second part was because I felt like there was a really compelling story there, and that the more I got to know Jim and the more I learned about his backstory, it felt like this was a guy who was destined to become a huge mainstream country star, but it never happened, and I wanted to investigate why it never happened.
Right. But at the end of the day, this is hardly a depressing sort of hard luck story.
I hope not.
It's really more of a story of someone who used his incredible sense of creativity and curiosity, and found a way to a remarkable career. When you decided to make the movie, who was the first person other than Jim that you wanted to call to talk to about him?
Buddy Miller. Like, that's a relationship that goes back 30 years, and they're kind of the Twin Peaks of Americana. Who have, they started out together in New York, and then Buddy played with Jim, and they wrote songs together, and they sort of came up in sort of distinct but parallel career paths. And yeah, so Buddy was the first person that I approached to be interviewed, and the first person that I did interview.
Along the way, as you were talking to, and it's a remarkable group of artists and songwriters and people in the music industry that you talked to, what was the most surprising, or who was the most surprising to you in terms of what they had to say about Jim?
Well, it was interesting because, like, when you're putting together a list of interview subjects for a film like this, partly it's just to tell the story through the different interviews, but a lot of it is you want different people to say different things. And the surprises were really with people who had a lot more to say about Jim than I thought they would. Like Ketch Seacole from Old Crow Medicine Show, I actually brought him in to talk to him about co-writing with Jim because they wrote a song on the latest Old Crow album. And that stuff didn't even make it in the film because Ketch had so much to say about Jim's records with Ralph Stanley and what they meant to reviving sort of Ralph's popularity at the time they came out, and how he admired Jim's songs when he was growing up, and that was an influence on him. And then with Elvis Costello, I thought it was just going to be talking about the time they worked together in the Sugar Canes, but then Elvis also had all this stuff to say about Jim's other albums because he's a Jim Lauderdale fan as well.
Was that part of the surprise, is that all of the people that you went to talk to ultimately, not only did they have some personal experience with Jim, either co-writing with them or perhaps performing with him, but there was a larger understanding of his kind of place in the music community.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know if it was really surprising, but the overwhelming thing that kept coming up with everybody I talked to, like the people in the film, and just every time I mentioned to somebody that this is what I was in town doing, just the love and admiration for Jim. The whole time I was making this film, and it's almost not a good thing. I couldn't find a single person with a bad thing to say about him. And I almost wished I had someone in there who hated him just to balance things out.
A little dramatic tension.
Exactly, yeah.
Is there a different, because I know your father actually promoted Jim's shows in Australia, or brought him to Australia. Is there a different understanding of Jim in Australia than there is in the United States?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question because there are so many different understandings of Jim here in the US. Mm-hmm. But in Australia, I think he's mainly known for his country work. Because the first time he came out, it was part of this sort of Songwriters in the Round show with Jason McCoy and Kim Ritchie and Fred Eaglesmith and an Australian singer-songwriter named Audrey Auld. And they did this Songwriters in the Round thing, and that was sort of Australia's first exposure to Jim as an artist. But everyone knew his songs. So people came along to the show and maybe they weren't familiar with Jim, but then as soon as they heard, it was like hit after hit after hit after hit that they'd all known from other people's records. And every time he's come back, he's won more and more fans as an artist, but from people who were already familiar with his songs.
So looking at the film, is there a moment in the film that for you encapsulates what you were trying to get at in making the movie?
Well, there's a few. I mean, some of my favorite bits in the film are kind of the Jim being Jim bits, like the guys, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice.
That is my personal favorite part of the movie.
So some of that stuff, and just when you see the chemistry and the camaraderie he has with other musicians. But I think my favorite actual moment in the film is probably him standing out in the California desert in a Manuel suit playing the King of Broken Hearts just on the acoustic guitar.
Yeah, that's I got to say that's pretty good. And with that is a nice segue for me to introduce the focus of the film and the reason we're all here tonight, and someone whom I truly believe is a singular figure in the music community, Jim Lauderdale. All right, so first time you saw the movie, you thought?
The first time Jim saw the movie, we really, was. No, I appreciate Jeremy so much for doing this, and tell you, 22. Can you believe it? I mean, most 22-year-old kids, they. So I'm very grateful and honored that Jeremy did this, and he's got such a bright future. I keep now that this is done, I keep prodding him to do a whole trilogy of major motion pictures, to get out of the documentary thing, and some things that Jim can star in and write the soundtracks.
Well, Jim and I have sort of been talking about, there's this history of great films made based on albums like Tommy and Quadrophenia and The Wall, and we've sort of been talking about the idea of a film based on the Bluegrass Diaries.
Well, that's right. And as a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag here at the Grammy Museum, but we've actually started work on the Bluegrass Diaries. I'll backtrack a little bit. Has anybody ever read the Basketball Diaries? Jim Carroll.
Jim Carroll.
Well, yes. Yeah. Well, unlike though, there are some similarities between these two things. But I was not a teenage male prostitute junkie though. But I was a teenage bluegrass junkie, and now the Basketball Diaries was made into a major motion picture, and it is official that the Bluegrass Diaries is going to be made into a majar motion picture, and Jeremy's going to. Now, one of my favorite actors, and of course here we are in L.A. in the center of the universe for the film business. The guy that. Now, Leonardo DiCaprio played the character in the Basketball Diaries, and he's a fantastic actor. I'm not taking anything away from him at all. But the guy that we've cast to play me I've been such a fan of his, and it's really, I mean, I think this year is really going to be kind of a turning point for me. I mean, with this now, with some of these new records, filming the Bluegrass Diaries, and this actor has been in Nashville for the last 3 months, shadowing me, as we say in the film business. I mean, he's been eating, he's just been, observing me. He's got, my mannerisms. He eats like me. He drinks like me. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and there he is just staring at me, like this far away from me. But I think, hey, whatever is going to make it a better film, and for him to portray me better, that's okay. So anyway, I'll go ahead and tell you tonight, because the Hollywood Reporter is going to talk about this tomorrow and the thing. But folks, I'm so proud that the guy that is going to be playing me in the Bluegrass Diaries is the great Wilford Brumley. And former Senator Fred Thompson of Tennessee is going to be playing the young me in the movie. So be looking out.
You're on your way.
Yes.
You are on your way.
Yes. Jim is on his way. So
I don't know where to go from that now. It's too good. As you're watching them film, and you're seeing, artists like Elvis Costello and Buddy and Rodney Crowell talking about their experience in working with you, and obviously in an extraordinarily complimentary way. Is there something about you, from your perspective, that makes your ability to collaborate with all manner of different artists unique? What is it about your approach?
I don't know about that. I don't know how to answer that. Just for me, it's just more of a feeling of luck, kind of, or like, going through life at various times when things just seem impossible, or when you're real young wanting to get something going. And then for me, it took so long. I mean, my peers were Dwight and Steve Earle, were doing great and having these big records, and I was really struggling, and I just like, God, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. But then through time, my goals or expectations or whatever kind of changed too. But it's I never would have imagined this stuff happening, to be able to collaborate with these guys. And so I just think it's good fortune,
I mean, your story is very much, a story that, in some respect, unfortunately, you run into a lot in the music business. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of rejection. A lot of people walk away, quite frankly, and you didn't. And you kept writing and kept working and finding your way and kind of following, a vision, whether intended or not. When you look back now, is it all surprising, or is it like, yeah, I did exactly what I wanted to do?
I think it's all surprising, because my wish list of the kind of a career trajectory just didn't happen. The way nothing ever turned out, and whenever I've tried to strategize, and it still happens like that. Whenever I get these concepts of things that I want to happen business-wise with my music, it never turns out like I want it to. Yeah. And but I still feel like I'm finding my way out there and still struggling. I still feel like I'm a new beginning artist that just got a record deal. It's just, playing, and so.
I thought the scene, I thought the whole segment around Merlefest was so analogous of the entirety of your career that, you know, here you are 1 minute playing on one stage with a bluegrass band and another minute playing, you know, with a straight up country band on another stage, and then another minute going to a songwriting workshop, and, you know, and talking to people about the art of songwriting. And this year you've recorded something like 5 different projects. How do you keep all that straight?
I don't. I'm very. Odie was saying that in the movie that I thrive on chaos or something like that, and I guess unfortunately, it's true. It's very. I'm very fragmented or something. I mean, it only comes together for me when I write.
But it all, I mean, it all does ultimately seem to work. And it's just speaking of writing, I've read a couple of quotes of yours where you talk about, you know, great songwriters, you know, whether it's Harlan Howard or a couple other people who, you know, you remark about the speed at which they can come to a concept and create a song. And yet in the movie, there are a number of people who say exactly the same thing about you. Do you think that that's something that you've taken away from these, from working with some of these great songwriters?
Actually, I'm slower than, I mean, when I co-write with somebody, like especially with Robert Hunter, it's really quick. I mean, I'll when I get together with him in person, we'll talk for a little while, and then I'll throw out a melody, and then I'll go, okay, let me, you know, sing it, do it, put it on your garage band thing, which I hope the Apple folks are here tonight and hear me endorse that.
Free MacBooks for everyone.
Yes, but yeah, look under your seats. And, but so I'll you know, put this melody down, because melodies that's the quick thing for me. They just come, a whole arrangement will come out, and so I'll leave it and then go in the other room and start another one, and then he'll bring, you know, this finished lyric, and I'll look and I go, great, that's great. Okay, I'm about done with this one. And so we'll do that, and so we can write most of an album in a day and a half, you know, like, you know, and then.
Just speaking of, you know, doing things quickly, the Buddy and Jim record, which I understand was done in 3 days, and according to Buddy, but it sounds like it was done in 4. You know, which is pretty impressive. But when you listen to the record, I mean, you can just tell that you guys have been working and writing together for so many years. Talk a little bit about that relationship and what you get from working with Buddy.
Well, when I first saw Buddy in New York in 1980, he hadn't been there that long, but he got a buzz going about him really quickly. And so I went into this country bar called Cody's that I had some gigs at, and he was playing there, and there he was with Julie, and he just blew me away. And so I started going to see him more and introduce myself to him. I always get choked up. Sometimes when I introduce him on stage, even I start crying, because he is just such a great guy. That he had a heart attack several years ago, and I was afraid he was going to pass away, but he, you know, made it. But he's like a guy that's kind of saved my life several times. And in New York, I'd go see him. He'd always very kindly say, you know, come and do a few songs you want to do. And it would just make my week. And it was just it was depressing being up in New York and not, you know, it was kind of a strange world of playing country music in New York. But it worked. I mean, it worked, and there were so many people that dug it. But several times since then, Buddy has just done things, and this new record too. We've been talking about making it for so long, and he has just, gone to such great things. And so I really look at this as a kindness to me for him to do this with me, because I think he was just kind of, reaching out to.
And you guys, you have a show together on Outlaw Country.
Yeah.
Which is terrific.
Which is another thing. I mean, he didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
He could have just done it on his own.
Yeah.
And so.
It's terrific fun to listen to, and getting the sort of the collective wisdom from both of you in terms of music and the things that you guys listen to is really terrific. He's
really a unique human being and musician and writer and singer and player. Just everybody really loves him.
Yeah, yeah. I promised that we would give the folks here in the house a chance to ask.
I didn't realize.
A chance to ask a question or two, and I'd get run out on a rail if I didn't do it. Do we have a question? Yes, sir.
I saw you at this year's Strictly Bluegrass, and your set with Buddy was amazing. It was one of the highlights. I was wondering how you first got involved with Strictly, and if you ever had the chance to jam with the founder Warren Hillman.
That was one of those festivals that you just kind of hear about, and you think, gosh, I really want to.
By the way, that's the big music festival in San Francisco.
Yeah, and so eventually I finally got a gig up there with my bluegrass band several years ago, and got to do that a couple of times, and was with Elvis Costello a couple of times, and then this year sitting in with Buddy, and then having an electric band, and having Buddy play. And Warren, I never got to jam with him. He's the guy the benefactor and the man that started Strictly Bluegrass, and it's a free concert or festival in San Francisco for 3 days, and it's huge. I mean, it's close to
multiple stages.
Yeah,
literally 80 or 100,000 people come over the weekend.
Yeah,
and Warren Hillman, who was a very successful investment banker, pays for the entire thing, lock, stock, and barrel. The city of San Francisco, no one pays anything
for all these. And he has some folks that he has every year, and Buddy is one of them, and Emmy Lou and Steve Earle, and so Warren, and so he. Left a lot of inheritance to Strictly, so it'll go indefinitely the same way.
Yeah, he left an endowment to allow the festival to continue. Do we have another question?
For Jeremy, it seemed like you had a lot of material, and how did you decide what to leave out and what to put in? It seemed like it was so vast, and I would have liked to see more. When there was a cut that was just getting...
The critical editing question.
Yes, well, the first cut of the film was a little over 3 hours long, and the version you just saw was about 1 hour 33. So there's a lot of stuff that got hacked out of there, and it was really about, because like anytime you make a film, you're trying to make the concisest version you can possibly get. So I had the 3 hour version, and then I just went through it, and it was like a big block of clay, and I was sculpting out everything that was not entirely essential to the spine of Jim's main story. But there was so much stuff that it just killed me to take out, and that'll be on the DVD as extra material. Actually, on the Buddy and Jim side of things, there was this great story that Buddy told me about. It was the mid-90s, and High Tone Records called Jim up and said, hey, are you with anyone at the moment? Have you got a deal with anyone? We're huge fans. We'd love to sign you. And Jim was with maybe Atlantic at the time, and he said, oh, no, sorry, I can't. But I tell you what, my guitar player, Buddy Miller, he's a great singer, a great songwriter. He's got some great songs. He's a great player. You should sign him. He'll make a great record for you. So they called up Buddy and they signed him up, and they said to Buddy, "So you got enough songs for a record?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got plenty of songs." And he was lying; he didn't have any songs written. So he'd had started a couple of pieces of songs, and so he went to Jim and said to Jim, "Hey, can you help me finish these songs?" And that was Hole in My Head and Love in the Ruins. So Jim's response.
Gosh, why didn't you leave that in?
No, they're coming. The director's cut. So don't miss that. Thank you to Jeremy for bringing the movie.
Thank you.
And thank you to Jim.
Thanks, Scott. Thank
for
you.
being.
Thank you for having us.
For coming and sharing your story with us. One of the best, ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Dillon, Jim Lauderdale.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.